Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Barkeys, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop, let's start again. Well, Billy, we've come out of hiding again. All about, well, gosh, it's the 50th anniversary. Dum, 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 dum. Great music. Oh, that was John Williams. 50th anniversary of what do we got? Jaws.
Jaws, one of the most iconic. I mean, through the ages, there's been science fiction movies, but distinguishing from science fiction and horror, monster movies. And Jaws is right there with Godzilla, King Kong, and Frankenstein as one of the most epic monster movies of our lifetime.
Well, that's it. That was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And let's get to that in a moment. But I think as we were talking about this, there's one obvious scene that jumps out as a classic scene, and there's dozens of them, maybe hundreds of them in this movie that's 50 years old now. It was released in 1975. Do you remember going to this movie in 1975, 50 years ago? Come on, scratch your memory. It's got to be in there deep.
Oh, absolutely. I remember. And I remember jumping at a couple of the scenes and then going back and seeing the movie later that day for a second time. And I jumped in my seat again.
Wait a minute. You went to the movie theater and paid your $1.50 or whatever it was 50 years ago, came out, and then went back again. How did that happen?
I was telling a friend of mine how good the movie was, and the next thing I know, I said, let's go. There's another showing. Let's go right down to the Bronxville movie theater with Jorge Saralegui, and boom, we watched it again. And there's so much stuff going on in there, and over the years, it wasn't a comedy, but we laugh at the lines from that movie to this day. It's epic. It really broke the mold. After King Kong and Frankenstein, had Godzilla. That was another epic that everybody knows. These are monsters that there were sequels and sequels and sequels to forever, but probably still. And then there was Jaws, which stood out by itself after all those other great monsters. And until Jurassic Park, it was the only real monster movie. And I don't think it's science fiction, but it tried to be a little credible. There are, it scared people about great whites. Are you afraid to go in the water? Are we going back in the water? There was a whole thing. It became almost a history marker.
Well, science fiction is a little more of a leap in your life. Can it happen like in Jurassic Park? I agree with you totally. Or in Godzilla climbing up the Empire State, or King Kong climbing up the Empire State Building. But in Jaws, there's so much real life. There are people that have been to the beaches, whether you live on the East Coast, the West Coast, or in the Gulf or Florida, whatever. Everybody's been to the beach, and
there are actually living survivors of shark attacks, and there are no living survivors of Godzilla or King Kong or Frankenstein. So well, Spielberg did a great job molding possible reality with King Kong like fiction.
Well, I think we ought to talk about some bullets here. So we got to talk about how it relates to other horror or suspenseful movies. We have to talk about the influence of Hitchcock. We have to talk about, hey, we even kind of uncovered that there's a tie-in to one of our favorite series of movies, James Bond. We're going to talk about that. We have a lot to talk about, but I think we should go back to the common denominator, which is the scratching on the blackwood.
You all know me.
You all know me. me. Know how I earn a living. I'll catch this bird for you, but it ain't gonna be easy. Bad fish. Not like going down the pond chasing bluegills or tommycards. This shark, swallow you whole. Shaking, tenderizing, down you go. And we gotta do it quick. I don't bring back the tourists. That'll put all your businesses on a paying basis. But it's not gonna be pleasant. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. You gotta make up your minds. You wanna stay alive and ante up? You wanna play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter. I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. $10,000 for me by myself. For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Okay, now that you've seen You All Know Me, you know, and I love he's eating those hardtack crackers that make a real, it's not like he's eating a saltine cracker. You would
No,
Spielberg, just like Hitchcock and great directors, got into the details of a Ritz cracker or a saltine won't do because you won't hear it.
right. Oh, absolutely. No, Spielberg, for whatever else he is, he's a very, very competent director who understands his audience. That's what Hitchcock was so good at. He understood his audience. He gave his audience credit for keeping up with his psychological maneuvers. I mean, The Birds was, you know, it's not a horror movie and it's not science fiction, but it's a version of Jaws in a way, something that theoretically could happen. Creatures that we see every day turn on us, you know, and there was no conclusion to it. With Jaws, there was seemingly a conclusion, but then apparently, you know, Jaws had some friends who took revenge out in many sequels after that.
Well, the reality, we've been to the beach. We know somebody that's caught a whopper of a fish. You know, here you're looking in our background. That's the orca. Ironically, the boat that Quint owned that they went out and hunted for the shark. And look at how real it is. It's got the rust on it. It's got blood, guts on it. And I don't think for this part, Quint shaved or cut his hair for 2 or 3 years.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah. And
I think there was the scene. I think Quint, Robert Shaw, was actually on the wrong side of inebriated for that scene when they're actually getting drunk and singing songs, you know, in the bottom of the boat there that night before Jaws starts, you know, banging into the side of the boat.
yeah, what about that scene? I think that scene deserves a kind of a discussion and a breakdown where they just finished whatever fish or whatever they had just quickly put together. It's a calm, it's a pause before the
Right.
storm, and
Giving us a
talking
break.
about history. They're talking about delivering the bomb.
Yeah.
How does that sound today in light of what's going on in the Middle East and
Oh,
things
yeah.
like
No,
that? This is
I'll never put
that
on
was
a life
that
jacket.
was in 1975, talking about something that happened a good 30 years before, and Quint was on the Indianapolis.
Yeah. We delivered the bomb. And they all went in the water. Sharks took the rest.
But to his credit, Spielberg didn't assume that his audience would know what that meant, the Indianapolis. So the conversation used by, I guess it was Brody who was ignorant about it. Dreyfus knew about what the Indianapolis significance was, but Brody like, well, what's that?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah,
What happened?
yeah, that's what you know, Brody was asking, and that's where that conversation went from, you know, sort of drunk frolicky, you know, wound comparisons to a serious dissertation by Quint.
Yeah.
Some of which made a little bit. It was sort of garbled. Some of it, which was, you know, they were drinking. And it
Well,
was
they
great.
were
I went over to my friend so and so, and bobbed up. He'd been bitten off at the waist. You know, it was so well
first
woven.
bosun,
Yeah, but it was woven
bosun's mate.
into the pot. The bosun's mate.
Yeah, no, they went from the I don't know, from the happiness, giddiness of showing the sweater, Mary Ellen Moffat, she
Yeah,
broke
where
my
she broke my
heart,
heart. Yeah,
and then to a little, well, what's that? That tattoo. Well, let's see.
yeah. That segue is classic, and it was probably the most serious part of the movie. Prior to that, it was all Hollywood, this, that, and the other thing. Everybody's excited about the shark. They're all going to die when everybody's piling in their boats with their firecrackers and fishing rods and chumming the waters to get to go chase this shark down like a bunch of idiots. And Richard Dreyfuss goes, "You're all going to die."
Remember the guy comes out of the provision store and sort of the black checkered, he's like there's a likeness of him on some sort of seafood brand or
Yeah,
whiskey brand. The subliminal stuff that Spielberg used, and in Hitchcock, this sort of stuff that he was playful. What
right.
what Hitchcock did in being playful was in each of his movies, I believe in all of them, he had a little cameo, right?
And certainly in 95% of them anyway. Yeah. Like in The
Yeah,
Birds, he's walking out of the pet shop with two little poodles or something like that on a leash.
I
Yeah,
forget which one. He's in the middle of a lobby and he's got a little baby in his lap.
yeah,
And the baby tinkles or whatever, and he goes to his side and he wipes off his hand in his cameo. So he played with it. And in this
even
movie,
in Lifeboat, where they're all in a boat.
how can you do a cameo in Lifeboat? How does he walk by in the ocean? I'm
Yeah,
trying to figure that out. Go ahead and tell everybody how he
they
did
have,
the
they have
cameo in
a
Lifeboat.
newspaper. He's on the guy picks up the newspaper on the back. There's one of those before and after ads, and it's Hitchcock.
Yeah, yeah, a weight reduction.
A weight reduction thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Hitchcock said he was never successful at in all the years he lived.
No,
Uh, but
he needed that shape was as iconic as he was.
well, another thing that we've covered a lot on this channel, the James Bond series, it just came to my attention that Steven Spielberg, and we'll show pictures of Steven Spielberg in this episode when he was a kid 50 years ago. This is basically like his first real film. His first real film. Can you imagine that? It's like the guy who did the Ten Commandments, he kind of succeeded, but his goal in life was in this movie 50 years ago was make a good enough movie such that Cubby Broccoli, who owned the James Bond franchise with a Saltzman, he wanted Cubby Broccoli to discover him and have him come on as a director in the next James Bond. That was his goal in life.
Yeah, and you look at Robert Shaw. No one lists him in the top 50 greatest actors of all time, but he was in two of the most iconic movies from back then, Jaws and The Sting, playing completely different parts. But that's almost it for Robert Shaw. As good an actor as he was.
Oh. He was in From Russia with Love.
Oh yeah, that's where
Drunk.
Yep. He was
Remember, he was getting him he was a blonde in that movie too.
Yeah,
Look at him now. But you're right. And the question is, I think I know the answer. Where was Shaw better in Jaws, or was he better in The Sting?
No, Jaws. Robert Shaw makes the movie. I mean, everything about it is great, but who else could play that part like that? Farewell and adieu. Just every line he had.
Well,
You
as we are both
go in the cage.
Yeah.
Cage goes in the water. Sharks in the water. Our shark.
Well, that's a good point. We're going to come back to that. Let's come back to the cage because there's a whole scene about that. But so when you go and look at sort of in the middle after they catch a shark, after all those guys throwing firecrackers, somebody comes in with a 8 or 10, a 7 or 8 foot shark. Ha
Yeah,
ha.
they're taking
Oh,
pictures of them.
I think this. What's this? A macaw? I think he's got his little pencil
Yeah.
eraser tapping on the shark like this New Englander. You can't get there from here. He's tapping on the shark. A macaw? What's that? And there was a little bit of innuendo in there too. We don't have to get into that now, but so they go after they're drinking red wine with white wine, and Dreyfus is eating the kids' leftover food. Let's go cut up the shark. And his wife says, "You can do that? I'm the chief of police. I can do what I want."
Yeah, and this was a resurrection role for Richard Dreyfuss as well.
Right, right. He needed a bump in his career. So they go out into into the warehouse, and somebody's go put it in Ben's warehouse. We'll
Yeah, yeah.
cut it open later, and they cut it open, and out pops a Louisiana license plate. And if you look closely, and this is what I had to go look into, the license plate says 007, and that was a subliminal message to Cubby Broccoli.
Homage. Yeah.
Homage, but also a subliminal message. I want to direct the next James Bond. And the reason it was a Louisiana license plate, why? They had just finished taping or filming Live and Let Die, which there were a lot of scenes in New Orleans.
And the new character, the new odd job in the Bond movies was named Jaws.
That's right. That was a different movie. What was that?
Well, he was in several of them.
Yeah, with the teeth, and
Yeah,
he had a romance.
he could fall out of the sky 5,000 feet and not die.
You brought up a couple things which I'm an amateur movie critic. You're more of a professional, and you can name movies. You can name movies while you're talking in your sleep. You're so good at this. But what you just said about Robert Shaw, I believe is true of maybe each of the main actors in Jaws. They made it real.
Absolutely, yep.
They made it real. You could smell the fish and guts on Chief Brody's hands when he's slopping it out in there. He's smoking a cigarette. You can almost smell the smoke of that cigarette.
Or Richard Dreyfuss, when he goes in the cage, I got no spit.
Yeah, I've got no spit.
Yeah.
Anybody who dives knows there's a time when you need spit to clean off the mask and make sure.
It was just so well played. He legitimately looked scared to death in that scene. It's like, oh God, I know I have to do this, but I got no spit. Jesus, I got him going down there. He makes one fatal mistake, which I noticed even the first time I saw it, was putting that poker thing outside of the cage. Why is he holding that outside of the cage? I'd be everything inside the cage. I don't want my hand sticking out there.
It's the same reason, like in the commercials, let's just go in the truck. And they'll go into the garage with all the saws.
Why don't we get in the running car?
Let's get
Are you crazy?
Let's step off the train tracks. Hey, Bug, don't go near that windshield.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But the reality, now, even as you look in the back of this picture, what do you notice? It's a murky, kind of greenish, whatever color that is. It's not a beautiful Caribbean blue water. Why? Because it's not fun.
This isn't fun. And if you even think about it, these three guys are focused on, to them, the only danger in their lives. There could be a tidal wave coming behind them, they wouldn't see it. Or a submarine, any number of things could be going on behind them, doesn't matter. Right now, at the end of this rope is all we're looking for.
Well, they were so into it. At one point, the rope is behind, was it
Brody's legs?
Brody's legs, and then the fish got it, and then it snapped it in, and that's like a garrote, like that's Robert Shaw used the garrote in James Bond, from his watch, and he would kill people, and that was basically a larger version of the garrote around Brody's thighs, and I think he got a little chafe there.
I'm sure. And that was, that whole scene with the barrels. Don't wait for me. He can't stay down. Not with 3 barrels on him. He can't.
Well, the whole time you just talked about suspense. There's a lot of pieces of suspense, but let's talk about the suspense that you highlighted here, where Dreyfus has got to get the rifle hooked up to the rope to the barrel, and Brody's sitting on the edge, right?
Yeah.
He's sitting on the edge, right, ready to shoot, but he needs the rope from hooked up to the barrel.
Right.
And
the
where did
shark's
he
coming
get
and it's
that?
running out of time.
So it's like Hitchcock, you two people are having a cup of coffee and a bomb goes off. 15 seconds of, shock. That's it. But when you see it developing like that, as
Yeah,
Hitchcock
when you tell the audience it's coming, that's what Hitchcock said. That, you have a bomb go off, everybody jumps in their seat, or you tell the audience in 5 minutes a bomb's going to go off, and they squirm for the whole 5 minutes.
and the whole audience in my movie theater is get that rope on that barrel, get that rope on that barrel.
Absolutely.
Why? We want Quint to shoot the bloody,
Yeah.
the horrible figure. Bruce was his
The
name.
monster.
The monster. In the name of the Jaws was Bruce. He was a little temperamental apparently, but they wanted him to shoot it, and you could see Bruce coming right at the tip of the boat. He said, "Oh, they're never going to get it," and they just get it in time.
Don't wait for me. Don't wait for me. Just tying some kind of sheep shank rock knot. They demonstrated his ability, Richard Dreyfuss's ability to tie knots early on when Quint throws him a rope and says, "Tie a double sheep shank, whatever the knot was." And the contrast between their sailing abilities, their seamanship, the contrast between Quint, who was a rough and tough
Professional
old man in the sea,
Yep.
versus a scientific
Rich,
PhD, yeah,
born with a silver spoon in his mouth kid, who had all the things in his world. But they both understood, and that's how they came together. That Quint understood Dreyfus and vice versa because of their love of the sea and their detailed experiences about this. Now, Dreyfus had shark details that he could use the Greek and Latin words for, whereas Quint knew them like, you'll
up close and personal.
swallow you whole.
Yeah. And Quint was the domineering factor because, anybody with common sense and certainly in retrospect would have taken Richard Dreyfuss's boat out instead of the rinky-dink orca, which the shark, he ate the boat.
What about the conflict with Larry, the mayor? In the book, book, Larry's up to his, in loans to the loan sharks and to the mafia with hotels, and it's a bad season. And, in the book, they go into that a little bit more. They call them Larry's business associates. They didn't explore that, nor did they explore the affair with Chief Brody's wife and
Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah, it was unnecessary for the
unnecessary. Yep. And that's what Hitchcock would have said. It's unnecessary to put in. If Spielberg had put that in, it wasn't necessary to the story.
It would detract from the relationships that we're looking at here. It would completely detract from that. And maybe it worked in the book, but movies are different than books, and how they're presented, how a story from a book is presented, sometimes insults the author of the book, but it's for visual entertainment. It's a different thing.
I think Peter Benchley had to be extremely happy with this. He was involved in the screenplay.
Yeah.
But I think the screenplay is one thing. This is a lot of scenes put together, telling a story. Oh gosh, how many different? So they had the opening scene was at the beach around a fire with a bunch
of the most iconic opening scenes of a movie. The monster shows up in the first 2 minutes of the movie, 3 minutes of the movie. You don't see him, but you now know that music what that represents each time.
The music.
And it's also like, Spielberg, then he created a psyche in the audience that permitted him to monkey with you. So every time you think the shark doesn't show up every time it looks like he's going to show up. you know, where they're hanging their hands over the side of the boat or something.
Right.
It doesn't come that time. It does come this time. And the way he did it literally made you jump in your seat the first time you saw it, probably 3 or 4 different times. You were like, I didn't think it was there. I thought it was coming a minute later or a minute earlier. Yes.
Also, every time somebody put a toe in the water, you thought the shark was going to bite it off. Like
Yeah, when the dock breaks, when the old guys are fishing.
but the shark was there. The shark
He was there, but he decided to go the other way. You know?
Well, he came pretty close to the dock, and the chubby guy doing the crawl stroke just barely made it up with his wet boots and this and that.
There's another one where they pull the kid out of the water and they zoom in on his legs. They're still there.
Yeah.
Or the old fisherman in the bay when the shark goes around. He's in the boat. The shark.
Yeah.
Michael's in that boat, you know.
That
the whole runs over to the other side.
One word, Michael's in that boat, and they're going from that heated discussion, to running to the other side of the bay.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
and Brody, who has no experience really with the water, is with his gun. He's like bang, 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 shooting it.
The reality in this movie kind of mirrors how Hitchcock brought reality into Psycho, into the psychology of people, the double personality, or maybe how many personalities did Norman have? He had at least 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
But the
mother,
the reality of that, and teaching the audience, and it was, you got to get your audience, you got to be clear, crisp with the audience, or they won't get the suspense.
Yeah, and you can't let them down. So, you know, like Hitchcock said, if you're going to build up the suspense with the kid with the bomb, you know, he learned in I think it was Sabotage. You can't let the bomb go off.
No.
After you've made them squirm in your seat, so the audience is going to get mad at you.
What about when Dreyfus is chipping away at the hole in the boat of the and he gets the big old tooth? I think that's a mistake too. You grip that tooth so that you get blood in your hand. You don't let that sucker go, but you let it go.
Well, because
the
head rolled down and freaked them out. It freaked everybody out. That was another example. It wasn't the shark, but we were all expecting the shark, and all of a sudden a head rolls into it, and you're like, whoa.
Maybe if you asked 100 people the most shocking thing that they remember over the last 50 years, that's going to come up. That head coming out of that shark bitten hole in the side of the fisherman's boat. Ben, what was his name? Ben, whatever. Ben was the name of the fisherman that died.
Right.
Yeah. But that whole, and it, by the way, it was also pleasant. You know, Martha's Vineyard, where they filmed it, or Amity Island, it was pleasant, so forth. Little hometown USA with the
they have that big beach scene. You know, before the mayor allows that there actually is a shark. Even that's a great scene too. It's like when they now know there's a shark, and the mayor's in there like, my kids were in that water too. Oh well, get them out.
That's right. I like it even at the beginning of the movie when the guy's complaining to the hardware store owner, "You got nothing on my list. The summer ginks and the local dialect and the hard, you know."
Yeah, and the music, carefree music, you know, the music of the shark, and then there's the carefree music of the pandemonium going on, and you know, on the Cape during, you know, the summer beach time. So.
I'm surprised that they haven't gotten Alex Kittner on a podcast. He'd be alive today. He'd be interesting. He was a kid. Spielberg's still alive. That Alex Kittner can't be more than about our age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't he get eaten by a shark eventually, or no?
That's why he's not allowed to go on camera. He's supposed to be dead forever.
Maybe in Jaws 4.
Or
Jaws 2 was actually not a bad sequel, and I believe Spielberg did that also. And you had Roy Scheider, and they actually he tried to reach out to Richard Dreyfuss, who was unavailable. So they did connect them in a somewhat serious sequel. But after that, it got silly. You know, the shark was taking it personal. It was different. The shark's brothers coming after the Brody family, and you know.
I don't know how they figured it out, but they knew the audience.
They knew the audience.
They
And
knew the audience needed more of this, what we're looking at in the background. We needed some more.
to me, the fact that Spielberg, who did so many different kinds of movies, E.T. and Jaws, or Schindler's List, you fast forward to the 1990s, and he pops out with Jurassic Park, and as silly as that concept is, it's hard not to watch those movies because people like to see the dinosaurs walking around, and the great acting that's in those movies, and
Well,
they become like franchises.
well, the actors that were in the first of those movies were great. Guy that played the scientist,
Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill,
Newman played the
Newman, yeah,
cheating, scientist, and he got his. Yeah,
and the guy that's in that movie, and it, and he's in 75,000 other movies. Samuel L. Jackson is in Jurassic Park in the computer area.
right.
He doesn't make it. Raptor gets him somewhere along the line. Distinguishing horror and science fiction from monster movies, because like the movie The Thing from Another World with James Arness, he is kind of a monster, but it's kind of sci-fi, or Them with the giant ants, sci-fi again. But to me, maybe the top 5 monster movies of all time would be Frankenstein, of course.
Richard Attenborough, Sir Richard Attenborough.
Yeah.
He was very good. He played the lovable grandfather, and
Yeah.
the guy with the jeans.
He was also the chief officer in The Great Escape 30 years, 40 years earlier, whatever that was.
Yeah, well, maybe even more than that. That movie is an old movie. That probably goes back to the early '60s, The Great Escape.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So
the top 5 monster movies, what do you call them? Iconic monsters. Jaws is in there. I'd say Frankenstein, King Kong, Godzilla, and Jaws. And then you have to jump ahead to maybe Jurassic Park. And I'm talking just about monsters, not, psychological thrillers or sci-fi, aliens, and, because there's too many sci-fi movies. But King Kong, everybody knows who King Kong was. Everybody knows who Godzilla was. There's 60 Godzilla movies. There's 60 King Kong movies. There's 60,000 Frankenstein movies.
Yet, when I asked my friend Paul, who has a deep New England accent, he's from Boston and has a place in Cape Cod, what's your favorite movie, Paul? He says The Thing. Why would he say The Thing out of all these other movies?
I'm almost with him. I think The Thing is possibly the best sci-fi movie of all time. The dialogue in that movie, you couldn't fit a paperclip between the lines, one guy after the other. The guy's word is barely out of his mouth when the next guy talks. So they would refer to it as snappy dialogue. And it's very psychological also. You barely get to see this guy, who's James Arness, The Thing, until the end. And you never really get a close look at him. You get his arm through the door, they cut his arm off, it still moves. It's a great movie.
You see his remnants. You see the dogs he ate, and
then and the crazy professor in there.
Yeah,
you're wiser than we.
He wanted to keep him alive for mankind.
Yeah, but the reporter, watch the skies. That's how the movie ends. Watch the skies. And that was sort of the genre of the 50s after Orson Welles did The War of the Worlds. It was to scare people with very realistic threats in their minds, realistic threats. So, flying saucers were a realistic threat back in the 50s. People thought, why not? You still kind of think, why not? Flying saucers.
It's a little more real now, but we go back to Jaws as we wrap this up in the next minute or so. As we go back to Jaws, the reality of every single scene that we were shown in this movie by Spielberg is unmatched even by Hitchcock. Maybe matched, but not overmatched.
No, it's perfection, by direction perfection. You just look at this picture. Look at Richard Dreyfuss, what he's wearing. Look at the look on his face. That's real. How did you get your shirt this dirty for the movie? And like you mentioned, the boat. It's very, you're there with them on that boat.
You absolutely are. And I like this picture. I'm going to share a bunch of other pictures. I've already shared a bunch of other pictures, but this one I picked because I think it captures what Spielberg was trying to do in the reality. The water's real, the rust on the boat, the blood on their hands, the
Even Quint's expectations when he leaves versus what he looks like now. It's like, okay, I think I got my hands full. I thought I was going to go out and kill not Tommy Rockets, or what does he say about the different kinds of sharks?
Tommy Cats.
Tommy Cats, not Tommy Cats.
This isn't going after bluegills and Tommy Cats.
Yeah.
What did he say? For $10,000, I'll give you the whole thing.
Yep.
Get the head, the tail, and the whole thing. Well, that's a wrap, Billy. This is a great movie. I'm going to go out and watch it again. Maybe I should go watch it in a movie theater. It'd be kind of interesting to see it in a dark movie theater.
Yeah, that would be great. It's worth it. It's worth viewing.
But we are back. We are back with our big mouths and big experiences and
Two
stupid
idiots
analogies.
scoping out sharks.
You all know me, know how I earn a living. I'll catch this bird for you, but it ain't gonna be easy. Bad fish. Not like going down the pond chasing bluegills or tommy cats. This shark, swallow you whole. Shaking, tenderizing, down you go.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add at the end. That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church, right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My
you.
brother was making me laugh.